How's it going, guys? My name's Jihad and that's Jeebins, and here we keep it uncomplex. So the A7IV was just announced. Finally, like we've been waiting for this for about, what was it, 2 years of rumors, and finally it's here. You know, I'm excited about it. I'm sure a lot of us are, but I just wanted to cover a few things, some things you should be aware of, some things you should consider before actually buying the new Alpha camera, and that's what I'm here to help you do. Just a few things to consider before you jump the gun and buy the new camera. So I'm going to quickly cover the new body design and the new sensor, and then talk a bit about file sizes, the new SD cards and SD card slots, and S-Log3. So I'm going to say the A7IV is kind of the budget version of the A1, Sony's flagship camera, except the A1 is like more catered towards sports photographers and just so happens to have excelling video features. The A7IV, however, will come at half the price. So the main upgrades and changes from the A7III to the A7IV I believe you should be aware of is the, let me check. An updated menu system, 10-bit video recording, 4K 60 with a 1.5 times crop, 15 stops of dynamic range, a fully articulating LCD screen, better autofocus, and better slow motion. First, I'm going to quickly cover the body design and ergonomics of the new camera. They all look the same. Nah, I'm kidding, there are ways to tell a difference. The main difference from the A7III and 4 is the bigger camera grip and the fully articulating LCD screen. So vloggers, rejoice. Because there is a bigger camera grip on the A7IV, any accessories that you bought for the A7III may not be compatible with the A7IV. So for example, the battery grip or any third-party handles or grips or an underwater housing that you bought for the A7III, it may not be compatible with the A7IV. But if you bought any of Sony's latest releases, so any cameras from the past 2 years from their Alpha line, so like the A9 II, the A1, the A7S III, the A7R4, accessories you have for those should be compatible with the A7IV. Overall, the bigger camera grip on the A7IV does make the camera easier to handle when like taking photos or recording video handheld. And they've also updated the doors to the ports on the A7IV. They're much more consolidated and more out of the way, unlike the flimsy ones on the A7III, which just hung there on the side. So that's a plus for the A7IV. And I'll let Jihad talk about the new sensor. The new system and sensor is derived from Sony's flagship, the A1, so you will notice better autofocus in video and photo. So you now have eye autofocus for humans, birds, and animals, and it works really well, staying stuck on the subject's eye. And their updated color science brings a more true to life and more pleasant colors to your image. And they've also added S-Cinetone to one of their picture profiles. S-Cinetone is a baked-in picture profile that comes from their high-end cinema cameras, and it's just a baked-in picture profile. So if you don't want to, say if you're pressed for time and you don't want to color grade or you don't want to shoot in log, S-Cinetone is the picture profile for you. Also, the addition of 4K 60 with a crop. So if you're looking to slow down your footage, you will be able to do that in 4K 60 and it will look a whole lot better than the A7III. However, there will be a 1.5 times crop, meaning you'll be zoomed in a bit in your frame, so you'll be a lot closer to your subject. It also does shoot 120 FPS at 1080p, which is the same as the A7III. However, it will still look better due to 10-bit, because on the A7III, it shot 120 FPS at 8-bit, meaning there was less color information. Less color information meaning your image won't look as accurate, but with 10-bit, it will look a whole lot better. Now, this is gonna be a long one. The bigger file sizes, I'll let Jeebins take this one. Recording 10-bit and taking 33 megapixel photos means more data. More data means more information, you need more space means you need higher storage cards. So I had to update my SD cards and the drives I use for transferring data. So I edit and store all my files on these. Samsung T7 and the Samsung T5. These are SSD drives, solid state drives. They're very reliable and compact, and they are more expensive, but I reckon they are worth the cost due to their ridiculous read and write speeds. Like unloading 30 gigabytes of data takes only minutes. So I do recommend looking into SSD drives. Even then, however, your computer may not be able to handle the codecs and the amount of information that comes out of your camera, because the highest format that you can record at on the A7IV is 4K 60 422 10-bit in all intra, which is 600 megabytes per second. What does that mean? A 128 gigabyte SD card will be full within 20 minutes of recording. That's what it means. It's a lot. I'll leave a link to Gerald Undun's video where he explains very well and in depth how all the codecs work and the best settings to use. But due to these large recording formats, I wanted to upgrade my computer system first because I didn't want to prolong my editing workflow by using proxies and have those increased rendering times. So before I bought my A7III, I bought that. No, it's the other way around. I bought you the iMac. Oh yeah, iMac 27-inch, 3.8 gigahertz, 8-core Intel i7, upgraded to 32 gigs of RAM, which was recommended to me for my current video workflow, and it has been working well with those certain specifications. And I can always upgrade my RAM later with higher storage RAM disks, like that is what I did with this iMac. I bought it with 8GB RAM, and then bought separate 16GB RAM disks that I installed later on. It also has what is it? An AMD Radeon Pro 5700XT 16GB graphics card. I don't know what that means, but apparently it increased editing and rendering time, so I got it. It was a major dent in my bank account, but that's the reality of diminishing returns. You pay more for slight increases in performance, and it only gets more expensive the deeper you get into hardware. But then again, once my A7III came, editing and scrubbing through my footage was a breeze. Like I didn't have to use any proxies, anything like that. Granted, at times, like after a lot of layering, so text layers, sound layers, extra video layers, adjustment layers, etc., it will drop frames at times, but not to the point where I'll get frustrated or it will render the editing process impossible, which what used to happen on my MacBook Pro when I was editing on that. Like I've had After Effects, Premiere Pro, Chrome, Adobe Audition all open at the same time while editing in Premiere, and I've yet to have any crashes, and that's a major upside because on the MacBook there were a couple times when it crashed on me. So upgrading to this iMac, it was definitely helpful for my editing workflow. So the point of that was to keep in mind when upgrading to the A7IV, when editing video, it will be harder on your PC and it will slow down your editing process. So you may want to upgrade in those departments first or adapt to a proxy-based workflow. Just keep that in mind. But another way to expedite your workflow is to actually upgrade your SD cards. Okay, get ready for more numbers. Get your notepad out. At the moment, you may be used to using 16 or 32 or 64GB UHS Type 1 cards for your everyday recording and photo shooting. However, on the A7IV, you'll need different type of cards in order to access the more storage intensive and higher bitrate formats on the A7IV. The A7IV now has 2 SD card slots and a newly added CF Express Type A slot. I'll explain what that is in a minute. Right now, on my A7III, I'm using 2 64GB UHS Type 1 cards with a read speed of 175 megabytes per second and a write speed of 95 megabytes per second. I have a collection of these lying around the house. They're cheap and they've been more than enough for me for my A7III recording and photo shooting. On my A7S III, which is what I'm recording with right now, I'm using 2 128GB UHS Type 2 cards. They're $200 each, Australian. Not cheap, but this is what's required to shoot 10-bit 422. Like the SD card needs to be able to handle and record all the information coming out of the camera. So it needs to have a higher write speed. And the write speed on this SD card, I believe, is 250 megabytes per second. And this SD card doesn't even give me full access to the camera's recording formats. In order to have full access, you'll need to use CF Express Type A cards. One CF Express Type A cards with 160 gigs of storage costs $600 Australian. 7 of those cards is worth another A7IV. 4 of them is worth more than my car. ProGrade just released their own version of CF Express Type A cards, which is a bit cheaper, but they're still expensive. But that's what it takes to have full access to all the recording formats on the A7S III and now the A7IV. Like the only thing I'm missing is being able to shoot 4K 120 in an all-intro codec. And that's just a codec that's easier for computers to process, but it's still more information. The A7IV doesn't have 4K 120, but it does have 4K 60 in all intro. So the V90 cards I'm using, the UHS Type 2 V90 cards I'm using, they will be enough for the A7IV. But if you want full coverage, ease of mind, and have excess funds lying around, then the CF Express Type A cards are for you. But like I said, the A7IV is going to dish out more information. Like on the A7III, recording video and photos on a 128GB card, you could hold hundreds and hours of photos and video recording. If you're shooting 4K 60 all intra on a 128GB card on the A7 IV, you're getting about 20 minutes of recording time before the card is full. If you're shooting 4K 24, you get about an hour. So use that information for how many cards you'll need whenever you decide to upgrade to the A7 IV. Again, I'll leave a link in the description to Gerald Undun's video. He explains very well the type of cards you will need, the best ones to use, and which formats will be applicable to those cards. If you're going to use the A7 IV mainly for photography, however, then whatever cards you're using on the A7 III, they should suffice. But if you're using the high burst mode, this camera does have a high megapixel count, so it will take more space. So if you want to like lessen the time on that buffer, I would suggest upgrading your card to which has a higher write speed, but then again, that's up to you. But also bear in mind, the buffer on the A7 III has improved as well. To end on a more or less good note, S-Log3. So the A7 IV now has 10-bit video recording, meaning we can now shoot in S-Log3. Because on the A7 III, my God, the amount of 3s in this video. The A7 III, I never shot in S-Log3 or 2 because it only shot 8-bit, meaning less color information, so it was harder to grade and get accurate colors out of the A7 III. So I always shot in Cine 4 picture profile, which is, it had a bit more dynamic range than the normal picture profile and ease of use when color grading. So I always shot in Cine 4, but then now that the A7 IV has 10-bit, we can now shoot in S-Log3, meaning you have more dynamic range and more color information. Like once I started using S-Log3 on my A7 and S3, it was very hard for me to shoot video recording on my A7 III, but I still use it as a B cam at times. So if you desire that better video quality that is close to cinema quality, that is one of the reasons why I would upgrade to the A7 IV. I think that's it. You got anything else to say? No, I think we covered a lot. Well, that is all we have for you today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that you learned something, that I pointed out some things to help you make a more informed decision before upgrading to the A7 IV. But that is all. Like and subscribe. Have a great day, and I hope to see you in the next one. Adios, mi amigos. Get out of my frame. Peace.